Being a former adult myself, I can say that unconditionally that this information is suitable for children of all ages. Except, of course, any of those who might have any sort of genetic characteristics they might have inherited from their parents. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that unsolicited testimonial. Still a little bit tied to some things I was mentioning last time we were taping, and I was going to give some additional examples, the sorts of things that I could have started out as I have done in the past and said something about here, is yet further in the litany of the dirty tricks that life plays on people, the verbal and intellectual flim-flam that goes on. Now, you've heard that done in these tapings before, and normally, besides whatever you gain from it, can elicit some laughter, the irony of some of it, the descriptions of me using Punch and Judy of life, playing within the framework of man himself, of playing different parts, even parts that seem to be in opposition. But rather than call it, again, the kind of trickery and illusions that life does, try and look at it even from another view, which is more complex. But the view being that man's intelligence, even though it continues to expand, is yet to reach the point that it, being a receiver, can take in enough broadcast material, information, so that there is no such appearance as irony, misdirection, inappropriate behavior, the whole menu of the sorts of things that humanity, even intelligent humanity, will point at and ridicule, laugh, criticize. A little bit further, and in addition to me pointing out that it is not any cause for alarm, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing truly liable to be criticized, and there is really no irony other than the fact that in the three-dimensional world, everything, if you look at it long enough, becomes ironical. It has to. But beyond that, it's not funny, it's not trickery, it's not some sort of hocus pocus, really, that life is saying, well, look over here, and I'm going to make almost everybody believe that such and such is true. And then I'm going to make such and such apparently be impossible to be experienced. Or it just happens so infrequently that people cannot believe that life would be so poorly arranged, that there must be something amiss. Other than that, which is one view, and for no other reason to go ahead and use again for intelligence helper, at least to keep you in the beginning from sniveling about it or from swinging at it, at least to be able to smile that, not a sardonic or sarcastic smile, but a brain smile. So if it helps in the beginning, all right, but there is a point beyond that that I am trying to get you to look toward tonight. It does not belie the trickery, the flummoxery, and the flim-flamming kind of view that you can see about what occurs in the life of man that almost everyone else takes very seriously, hostilely, cynically. But beyond that is to see that everyone is doing the best they can with the apparatus vis-a-vis the potential. Now, regardless of there being stated from any source what might be the absolute finite parameters of the universe, of creation, you should surely be able to see by now that there is more to reality, if for no other reason just based on the strictly sensual basis of high school physics, that there are known realities in the electromagnetic spectrum that humans cannot experience. And yet with the right kind of technology, there's no doubt they're there. But you cannot directly experience and hear radio waves. You cannot directly experience, that is to know it, your body's experiencing, but you cannot have any intellectual reception of the fact that you are bombarded by radiation, for instance. And yet now, probably kids in middle school accept that. It's a fact. So surely some of you have your own, if not periodic views, strong brain smile suspicions that the known electromagnetic spectrum is quite possibly not the end of it. And of course I've slipped up in times and told you that it's absolutely not the end of it. And so you have more information available than the human intellect can receive. Can you see that that is the basis for the kinds of things that I could call, or even other people could call, the ironies of life, the injustices of life, the inexplicable behaviors of life and of other people and of oneself? Can you see that simply based upon that that is a more complex description rather than me just saying it's a Punch and Judy show, and that you cannot see that both hands are being run by the same person? Current reality, locally, is not only an individual thing, but you have local reality being the entire collection, addition of all human intelligence at any particular time and place. Right this second, there is a local reality for human intelligence. That local reality in toto does not receive all of the information that's available. I'm going ahead and use some more examples, not for the basis. It's even you people on tape should be warned, even if it's the first time you're seeing it. It is not to point at human activity and to laugh at it, although I know it normally gets a laugh. It's not simply to point out the incongruities of human behavior, because I will point out one more time, incongruity is an inescapable fact if you look at anything long enough, in case you want to use that synonymously with irony. There is nothing, all the way from religion, science, common sense, anything, if you observe it long enough, will become ironic. That is, it will apparently be producing the kinds of results that are in direct opposition to its stated premise. Everything. If this was some systematic form of stuff, that could be the premise of it. That could be the beginning and the end of it. And everybody could wander off. And someday, perhaps, if the moon was in the right house and the fifth dimension had not broken up and could fly away, maybe one day it would strike you that, yes, there's the answer. Not what I just said, but behind that. That is, that everything, if you look at it long enough, becomes ironic. Everything. Everything. Your conception of goodness, your conception of truth, your conception of guides, if you still believe in such as that, one day will become its own opposite. That what you see, what you had no doubt was alpha, one day will become omega. X will become Y, A becomes Z, black will become white, and etc. Stripes will become polka dots. But I was going to pull out a few more examples that cross all the boundaries of history. One that's been around and is still around, at least in some religious quarters, but is the mythological idea of the enemy to progress. Under more primitive conditions, it would be referred to as the devils and the Satans and the Lucifers. That is, progress being the good guides. And then there being the bad guides, all the way from Greek stories up until modern days. And according to the translators from the original Greek, and the primitive Western Protestant ministers still use it, but it's a very old idea. You can find it in Hindu literature and all over. Just take my word for it if you don't know. Is there has been a common description, a name given to this anti-God, the bad God, the opponent of progress, the adversary of goodness. Now they've named him all kinds of things, or her, but the one that life should award itself some sort of quadrimensional Nobel Prize is the name, the Great Deceiver. Now, may I note to you people getting this on tape at some other time in some other place, this has nothing to do with religion. This has something to do with the operations of the human intellect as fed by, as limited by, our good buddy, life. Once you have labeled the opponent of progress, goodness, truth, once you have labeled and put upon it an anthropomorphical dress that this opponent actually exists or can take on form, but it's a force. It's a force against goodness, truth, and progress. And if we were going to refer to this force in a humanistic term, we could call him all kinds of things, like the bad guy, the Prince of Darkness, I think used to be one, and the Great Deceiver. But note, calling the opponent the force that is devolutionary, to call it the Great Deceiver, has, even for life, in my humble opinion, having been a former adult, well, that other guy was, I just heard that, being the Great Deceiver produces this most edifying, if not stupefying, result. That any opponent a human has to your ideas, your theories, can be said to be under the control of the Great Deceiver, notwithstanding the fact that this opponent seems equally as intelligent, as decent, perhaps from the same genetic travel background as you, and in fact, your adversary proclaims without any hesitation that he too is on the side of goodness, that he is aligned unconditionally with the forces of progress and truth, and has never been considered generally any more insane than you are. But by labeling the forces that are against progress and truth and justice as being the Great Deceiver, all is forever explained. That the other person could even be put to the stake and the faggots lit at his feet, and as the flames leap up and Cardinal Fang says, admit the error of your ways and we'll turn you loose, and the poor guy says, no, I can't, because I have always been on the side of goodness, and you may kill me, I don't know what else to do. And so you would think, boy, are we making a mistake? I mean, the guy's going to let himself be burned like a cheap hamburger while swearing that he's on our side. You know, us being the good guys. But then one of the assistant cardinals can say, it's the Great Deceiver at work again. And then the head cardinal, oh, and everybody else says, yeah, you're right, we forgot about that. Because once you fall into the hands of the Great Deceiver, all things are possible. That is, all opposition put it more direct. Everyone can look at everyone else as being unknowingly in the clutches of the Great Deceiver, and therefore unwittingly oppose the proper, righteous, progressive ideas that you hold. You then do not have to fry your enemies, which nowadays are considered somewhat less couth than perhaps it was 500 years ago. But you do not even have to verbally and intellectually denounce them unconditionally. It can be on the basis, well, I've known the guy a long time, or I knew his family, and he seems to be decent. And as far as I can tell, he really believes that what he's doing is proper. He believes that what he thinks, his ideas, he believes are actually for the benefit of the village, our people, humanity. But that just shows you the power of evil, of devolution, or if we were still in the days of calling them demons, that he is in the grasp, under the control of the Prince of Darkness, Lucifer, the anti-gods, the great deceiver, because you will go ahead under those conditions and believe that you are thinking correctly, doing correctly, and it's so simple. You know, of course, he's in the grasp of it and can't see it, but for us outside, it's so simple to see. That's the trick. That's the way the forces of evil and error and involution work, is to take people and make them do their bidding. That is, to do evil, to do bad, while telling them that they're on the sides of the gods. How simple. Except, of course, when you're in the clutches of it and the great deceiver's going, look into my eyes, and you're under my power, then you go ahead and you think you're doing right. One more caveat. Got nothing to do with religion. That's not what we're talking about. Consider the chemical operations of the human intellect, the fission that the human intellect, per force of its very chemical and electrical makeup, must make of all things, of all human experience. And rather than it just being split like a piece of dry coal and it falls there and it lays there, it apparently has some vitality. The split itself, the dichotomy, has some. Not just, which is primitive enough, but it's not really enough nowadays to keep things going, but it can be split into, well, we just got truth and error. We got the good guys and the bad guys. Well, come on, folks, this is the 20th century. So there's got to be shadings of something somewhere. We got to take into account not just the Old Testament and Vedic stories of good and evil. We've got to take into consideration unconscious forces, psychological insights. And so now, it doesn't go under that name in certain circles, but the great deceiver, no longer among sophisticated people. Nobody uses that term. Probably some of you have never heard it. If you haven't, if you think I made it up, turn on your local Christian cable station and see those guys, and they still refer to it. Humanity is still referring to it under other names. But rather than you being in the clutches of the Prince of Darkness, the Old Testament Satan, has now got you in his grasp, and you're doing his will, you're doing his bidding and not knowing it. He's made you think that you're working for Jehovah and the good guys, and you're actually working for him. And boy, what a laugh he's having at your expense. They don't call it that nowadays if you're more sophisticated. But see if you can make this jump right quick. What is the whole idea of unconscious motivations? The whole idea of being in some way in conflict with yourself, of operating in any manner that is unprofitable to you. All forms of phobias, manias, obsessions. What are they? Well, I feel like if I don't wash my hands at least once every 5 minutes, that I could get very sick. Now, not having a minister there to fuck around with your affairs, we now have a psychiatrist. And he thinks in the same way that a minister did before him in other generations. Well, this is not true. But is the person actually evil? Well, we don't even think about evil. Or are they foolish? Are they dumb? Well, his IQ checks out. He's right in the middle of the bell curve. What is going on? He's in some way been, I almost wanted to say deceived. But of course it was nobody's fault. What's happened? some force of which we are currently unaware. Obviously some trauma in his childhood. Something has happened that now makes this person believe that they're doing good, at least for themselves, like, well, I've got to wash my hands. Excuse me, I'll be right back. Well, didn't you just wash your hands? Well, yes, but that's for 5 minutes ago. I've got to wash them again. The person's operating under the influence of a delusion of some kind. They are being deceived by some sort of unconscious motivation. This is not, I do not intend tonight to be as simple as I'm starting off. And so I'll go ahead and warn you, it's about to shift gears, but verbally it's not going to sound, if any of you are just listening with old kind of ears that might be under the control of the great deceiver, you're going to miss it. So I'm going to warn you beforehand, like a good magician in the 3D world. If you don't know, the one thing that they always used to teach magicians and illusionists in magician school, the first thing before they taught you a trick or let you buy a blow-up duck or rabbit and get a cape, is the first thing they told you was very important, which we could make some sort of system out of this. Is they tell them, that is, the would-be magician, tell the crowd what you're going to do it, and then, most important, tell them that you did it. So they go, oh! Some of you might care in your spare time later to expand that into areas beyond the world of legerdemain. So, but I was going to tell you that I was going to do it, just in case you, which I already spoke for you, some of you are not going to know I did it, so I'm going to tell you, now I'm about to do it. Another example. Now, I'm about to do it. There is a strategic military emplacement in this particular city, and there have been all sorts of leaks and reports coming out about spies in the midst of the people doing, at least it's hinted and suggested, doing and have done grave damage to the security of the state. And so everyone gets concerned. I could have made this that it was a nurse's home where the student nurses live, and there's been a rapist around. Well, let's go back to the one of the spies. The authorities catch this guy. They've observed for a while, and for a period of time, of nights, of days, there's this guy that's hanging around the periphery of the installation, of the base. And so they finally question him. They finally jump out of the bushes after a few days and nights of observing him keep showing up. And he says, oh, after a few questions, they own his name and hold up your hands. And he says, oh, it's about the spying. I said, what do you know about it? Oh, well, I know as much as anybody else reading about it. I am a good citizen. I came out to help keep an eye on the place. Now let's assume that the authorities that have now stopped the man have no additional information other than what I've given you. That he has been the only figure since this whole sorry affair came to their attention, has been loitering around the base. That's all they know. But what would you do if you were in charge of security, or if you were just concerned yourself and you knew that your own family and the state's welfare could be in the hands of some sorry bastards around spying and selling secrets, and they find this one guy hanging around? You know, the man's not hanging around for his health. He's been out there 2 or 3 or 4 nights just hanging around. No apparent business, not waiting on anybody. He comes out there for hours and just kind of hangs around. But then they question him. Can I interrupt myself and say this has got nothing to do with states and military and spies? It has something to do with the human nervous system. They question the guy, And his face looks just as honest and dumb as Dan Quayle. I mean, howdy doody. They're a politician of some stripe. And he says, oh. He might even congratulate them on being on the ball for noticing me, because I wondered where the authorities might be. I have been out here as a good citizen, out here on my own, trying to keep my eye out to see what suspicious people might be hanging around. How are the authorities, some part of your own brain, how are they to recognize, how are they to know the difference, having no other information? How can they tell the difference between a good concerned citizen and a spy on that basis? They're both fulfilling at one level the profile, the expectations of what the authorities are seeking. Or this one guy keeps hanging around the nurse's home late at night. And they finally jump out and he says, oh, I've been very concerned. I live in the neighborhood and I heard about that rapist, man trying to assault women, and I decided to keep my eye on it. Because I had an aunt that was a nurse. And they think, he says, of course, I'm glad you people on the ball is out here too. I didn't know anybody else was helping me watch. I thought it was just my civic duty. If nobody else was going to do it, I thought I'd try and help out and at least keep an eye on the place. Human intelligence cannot tell the difference between good and evil, a spy and a concerned citizen, a rapist and a good neighbor, not on the basis of what I just gave you. And it is irritating to human intelligence. Now, it doesn't go around looking at the examples in life the way I'm describing it, and it does not go around, all you got to do is check your own brain, saying, well, I'm irritated by this. But it is. Human intelligence is irritated that it cannot jump out of the bushes. Remember, these examples are silly putty now. They're vaporous. But that it can jump out of the bushes and say, aha, and do everything in the beginning, except say, you spy, we've got you. Because this thing that you would have every reason to believe that we're going from point A to point B here in the 3D world. Aha! One guy, night after night, out here hanging around, and him go, ah! And in a second grabs her hand and shakes it, rather than hide that I am out here helping look. Boy, I'm glad you guys are here too. I didn't know anybody was here except me, trying to keep my eye out. It is irritating, without the human intellect calling it that. It is frustrating. I'm getting closer to the kinds of words that the human intellect uses, but not under these conditions. Not this specifically. Under all ordinary conditions, the human intellect cannot escape this kind of mental maze. And thus you have the incessant insistence by the human intellect all across the board, all across the planet, this insistence forever that somewhere there is a solid foundation for discerning truth from error, right from wrong, the spy from the good concerned citizen. It goes so far. This again, may I suggest to you, is not as simple as you may at first hear it and go, oh yeah. Not that you're wrong, but it's around the corner. It goes into another dimension. This is the basis of the continued insistence that there is a vademecum of some kind. In the times past, it was the Word of God itself. In the various scriptures, the Hindus and the Torah. Of humans, over a wide spectrum of time and space, let us take the Western world. The Bible as being the Western world's vademecum, and saying there, especially in the Old Testament, you've got God. You've got the big enchilada himself telling you, friend from foe, what to eat and what not to eat, when to stand up, when to sit down, what to do, how to tell truth from error. Now, there have always been parts of the human intellect and life's body, and you could play the same game right now if you know how to do it with no sarcasm, cold-bloodedly as much as possible, sang-froid, objectively if that was possible, is to say, how in the world, or why in the world, how cometh it, if you talk like that, and if you do, why don't you hang around my neighborhood, around the children and the nurses? You could be a mad poet. It's from one view, if you could do it with no criticism, no aggression, is how has humanity, including parts of me at times, you could say, how is it that we have taken this thing, the Bible, the Old Testament, and we've got billions, that's probably over 1 billion now, of people who will say, they will insist that parts in here, I mean, this is what God said. And then you ask yourself, well, now wait a minute. It says it was this guy, you know, this prophet of old Gottlieb, or Bob, or whoever it was, that he says that God told him, blah, 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 and it may go on for pages or chapters or who knows what, and we now, thousands of years ago, thousands of years ago, and today you have people who says they don't even bat an eye. They don't hesitate. They just say, well, they hear kids discussing something or people on TV debating something. There they may sit in the privacy of their own home and go, huh, well, God said blah, blah, blah about abortion, or God said so-and-so about alcohol. And so we'll assume, if you're correctly drawn into this kind of activity, you have the potential that somewhere in your nervous system has even replayed that same kind of scenario. You have the potential to do it somewhere down in you to say, all right, people say that. Reasonable, educated people just will say, they'll turn to somebody else and say, huh, well, God said you can't do so-and-so. Well, how do they do that? What's going on? They just say, well, God said it, because if I suddenly tried to play a truly cold-blooded, uninvolved, Perry Mason cum Socrates, and I suddenly stood up, or came to them and says, well, I'm very interested in this. You say that God said that men shouldn't do that. I just want to know, I'd be delighted to meet God. I mean, is that where you got this? Well, no, not exactly. Because God also said that it's not to man to see God or something. You say, wait a minute. Don't tell me anymore. Wait a minute. The first one where you said that God said that man shouldn't do so-and-so. Where did you get that? How do you know that God said that? I mean, do you have a friend that God said that to or something? Well, no, but. And they go rummage in their drawers or under their bed and they say, it says right here in the Bible. And you say, all right, the Bible. We got a book here, right? Yeah. Well, who wrote it? Well, God basically wrote it. Men wrote it down, but they wrote down what God said to them. Do you know these men? Oh, no, they're all dead. Well, do you know anybody that knew them? No. Do you follow? We're not making fun, it's not the point, of religion or the Bible or anybody's religious literature, because it is no more funny than Superman comic books and all that. So I don't think any less of it. But do you see that if the intellect was operating on the basis that the dictionary, and that on a warm day, many people's own intellect says, yes, that's what it should do. If you looked at this, may I say that it crumbles. It will not withstand just ordinary intellectual scrutiny, which we're still not to the point now. Don't just stop there. But the nervous system of man is constructed in such a way that it insists, even if it's not religious. Nowadays you can have, or you couldn't have passed too, but nowadays it might appear to be more obvious to you people, the humanist, atheist, agnostics, people that just say, well, religion's not the point. They still believe, they got no choice, that there is a vade mecum. It may be unwritten, which I guess really defies the term, but there is somewhere. Maybe it's just in the heart of man. Maybe it's just in the innate goodness of man before the environment has polluted him. Ha ha ha. But that there is somewhere a stable, systematic description and telling of right from wrong, the good citizen from the spy, the concerned neighbor from the mad rapist, goodness from non-goodness. The insistence. Now back to where we opened tonight's tape. If there was some basis, if there is some inalterable, inviolate division between good and evil, right and wrong, truth and error, etc., would you not, if you could still use just the intellect at the ordinary level as it purports itself to be capable of, would you still not, once I urge you a little bit, have occasion to think, well, we've had, the best of my knowledge, at least 3,000 or 4,000 years of men wrestling with this problem, and it goes back and forth, and it really gets nowhere. And rather than saying that it's some problem that's out of the hands of man, that it's the forces of goodness and non-goodness fighting out this battle in the hearts and the minds of man, rather than that, if my little intellect was just actually jump-started, got up to maybe 220, good operating temperature, and I was running on high-test gas, is it not just the possibility that our receiving mechanism, the human intellect, is not receiving all of the possible data having to do with this? Would that not be one, just one possible reason why we cannot seem to come to any solid, satisfying definition of truth from error, right from wrong? Why we cannot just walk up to somebody and say, hang around here at this installation here, we've had spying going on, are you a spy? And the man said yes or no. What is it that humans have been here for thousands and thousands of years and had an intellect going? Why is it that one human, especially a human in a position of authority, cannot walk up to another human and say, are you a spy or just a concerned citizen? The second one, no, you're not. Come along with me. Why not? Why can't you be sure? The more intelligent you are, the less sure you are of, all right, I heard that idea, and that idea is definitely I don't think that idea is, well, most people, most of the philosophy and the religious, most people say that idea is not correct. And I don't think it's, do you people really believe that? I don't think that's too correct. A man with a PhD, a man with 3 PhDs, a man with a hernia, and he says, the point somewhere, should it not strike just even ordinary intelligence that why is it at the most basic that you cannot ask one human something is important, something that should just tell itself. If this guy is a spy, he's going to sell out his own state here. He should be scared. I mean, if we catch him, if we come out of the bush and say, you've been hanging around here a lot every night, and the guy says, well, yes, I have. Are you the guy that's been spying and saying our secrets? Does it not seem, can you listen right quick, forgetting any horizontal, any ordinary ramifications of my example, to just suddenly walk up to another human and not be able to tell the truth from the error, right from wrong, up from down, left from right, day from night, because you can convince people, or you can get them doubting that, well, it is dark up there and I don't see the sun. Yeah, but is that any proof that it's night? I always thought it was. Wait a minute, you look pretty intelligent to me. You must not be up on the newest in quantum mechanics and physics, quantum cosmic physics. Well, no. Well, don't speak too hastily. You can make a fool of yourself. You can get lots of educated people go, does it not strike you, after all these thousands of years, and right now in the privacy of your own nervous system, that there still seems to be this continuing flow of ambiguity, uncertainty, irony, that here it is, not an individual, but now a huge institution says that its purpose is to help humanity. And yet, a large portion of their time and money is taken up waging war. That kind of thing. Well, it's just, oh, who knows what. And normally, if individuals are wired up to pursue this sorts of things intellectually, they have no recourse. They eventually either have to fall back on the idea of a faraway God, creator, anti-God, something outside the system that's responsible, or they've got to fall back on that kind of vague, equally unsatisfying idea that they're as yet unobserved, unrecognized motivations in man that makes him do these illogical, inexplicable, self-defeating things. But either way, you're thrown away from the intellect back to something else. So yes, I'm intelligent. Well, I think I'm intelligent. I spent, by God, close to $240,000 in the last 15 years on my education. And you ask the person just a simple question. And they go, well, that doesn't strike you at all? I told you it's going to be a funny little job. That sounds just simple as hell, doesn't it? Take the head of a worldwide religion, the head rabbi, the head pope. Take the president, if you want to get more secular, the prime minister, the most educated man, the man who gets the Nobel Prize this year in literature, in physics. Pick them all out and ask them just a simple question. Like we found this guy hanging around outside. You know, they threatened to blow up the building here tonight as we were giving the awards, and he said that he heard about it, and he was so concerned because he's always loved dynamite and matches. You know, well, hence his concern for the Nobel Awards. Anyway, and he said he was out there to help keep an eye out so that it wouldn't disturb the proceedings. Now we're about to award you, or we just have awarded you. You are the most. Let's say they got Nobel Prizes now for just the smartest dude in the whole world. And so they pull out old Dr. So-and-so and they give him that and they say, tell us, is this guy telling the truth or not? And he can't tell you. Or you say, is there life after death? And the guy just has been voted, given the award as the smartest old fucker on this planet. They say, is there life after death? And he goes. Or you say, all right, if we drop this, will it fall and hit the floor? And he starts to say, yeah, but as smart as he is, he realizes, wait a minute, this is a trick. They wouldn't ask me some kind of dumbass simple question like that. So then he'd say, well, there are those who say that it will, and there are those who say that they don't know. Or they could say, are you asking me this question on the basis of Newtonian physics or new physics? One more time, of course you people hear on tape, this is not laughing at humanity. If there's any laugh, it should be a brain smile on your own about, that is a fact. But that's not the point. It's not to go, well, that's a fact. Boy, you're... It's to realize that things are wired up in such a way that the intellect itself, which is the benchmark, it is the ultimate measuring tool, it is that which divides you from a possum, some of you. And that very thing, if it is pushed against the wall, if it knew how to do it to itself, like, can you tell me, am I holding up one finger or not? If pushed far enough, the intellect itself has to throw itself away to some sort of assumed. It keeps insisting, whether it be in the religious basis of a Bible or sacred text, or just on the basis that there are still forces inside the human intercourse amongst mortals that make people do things that we don't yet realize. In other words, the intellect itself has to say, well, I was doing pretty good until you got pushy about this. It ain't, the intellect will play 20 questions until you get like the 20 questions seem to be, well, almost anybody with a Trivial Pursuit game would have known that. And then somebody says, all right, off the books, the 21st question. And it asks you some astounding question like, am I holding up one finger? Or if I drop this, will it actually hit the floor? Then the intellect, it's as though then the intellect itself, the Supremo, has to take itself and just throw it somewhere. Is get thee away from me. There's some things we can't know. Can you see that the human intellect has never considered the possibility, because of the nature of the way it's structured, that none of the so-called reasons, none of the possible solutions, but none of the reasons given as to why humans cannot divine one simple answer. that the reasons given, the hypotheses hypothesized about why this is so, may not even be, of course everything's a ballpark, but they're down in the unused locker area. They're over at a stand that's been out of business for years. That the answer is that the information that produces local reality, including all the unanswered questions and everything else, but that information is not all that is universally extant. And the human receiving mechanism, that is, the human intellect, is not static. It is not a cul-de-sac. It is continuing to expand, but it has never caught up. It does not match. It does not track the amount of data available. And the amount of data being available is that which produces the inability to answer a simple question. It is that which produces apparent irony. It is that which apparently produces all manner of illogical, inexplicable, unprofitable behavior amongst people. That. And an ordinary intellect would go, where'd you hear that? Where'd you read that? I never read anything like that. I think enough of you heard it, but it's a matter that the normal information retrievable by the neural, chemical, intellectual mechanism, the hardware, is not all that is universally extant. It's that simple enough once you begin to see it. It does not necessarily give immediate answers to what your ordinary intellect might say are the unanswerable questions. But if you're hearing into this, do you realize that changes the whole scope? Scope's a terrible word. The temporal scope, which of course makes no sense. But it changes where you would look even. That where everybody's looked. It's not that it's in the wrong direction. There's no way to really describe how incorrect it is. That is, how unsatisfying it is. It's not, well, you people all look in the wrong direction. You people always look to blank, to Christianity, and you should have been looking to Islam. Or all of you people have been looking north, and you should have been looking south. That's not even close. It'd be more like, well, all right, everybody with all these questions, where they apparently are religious, scientific, moral, all of humanity has been looking east when where you should have been looking was green. That's closer. Which, of course, again, as always, is the big I. What, Indianapolis? No, insane. Now there are even further examples to kill another 10 minutes on the tape to satisfy the logistics. Another one that continues to go on, that been covered in our tapings, but brand new, scientifically based television special, even on the PBS Intellectual Network, on genetics. An hour show, and without having a stopwatch, surely half the show, a large part of the show, supposed to be an up-to-date survey, science, contemporary ideas, facts of genetics. Close to half the show, a large part of the show, those on camera, the voiceover, was telling how modern scientists completely reject those foolish, outdated ideas that human behavior and potential might in some way be genetically bound. And they would just You could see them reaching for a chiropractor, if not being gay, trying to pat themselves on the back. Like, yes, can you believe that as recently as just 20 years ago that some people believe that? And then go right into, from that, from playing the apologists for themselves, right into describing everything except using the very words of how fruit flies, possums, politicians, well, most forms of that genetics, that we now have it, it's just genetics, you can just see everything. All the way from, they'll get right to the edge of feeding mice that have been taught one trick, feeding the brains of that mouse to another mouse, and then that mouse seems to be, God almighty, almost born being able to do it. If not born, all it takes is just like a little hint. And then suddenly it cuts to another person. Yes, but thank God now in 1989, these kind of foolish, in fact dangerous ideas that certain people had around the turn of the century or in 1790 or in 1922, that humans in some way were bound up and just captive of their genetics. It's a good thing we've made the kind of progress we've had. You've got science to think. Do you hear me? It's not an attack on science. It is again the limitations that you should be able to see, not of science. It's not of morality. Although, if you want to take a side step right quick, somebody probably somewhere on this planet right now, that is in the last body, is probably made already, if not since I've said it, somebody will, a moral or a kind of argument that is going to be based upon an attack on the would-be morals of the apologist of genetics by saying, well, don't apologize for humans being captive of their genes the same as everybody else. You people just won't admit it. A few of you scientists, or all of you scientists, you don't admit it because you think it's going to be morally reprehensible and you'll be attacked. You'll be called a fascist, or you'll be accused of being the mad scientist that wants to engage in genetic engineering. You know, like, what the fuck has life been doing? We got to watch out for genetic engineering. We can't let scientists, especially not, of course, all scientists are a little funny, but those fooling around with genetics, we got to keep an eye on those people. Put a transmitter on them. Keep track of those people, because first thing you know, not only will they be trying to engineer genetics, they'll be telling people that genes control people. You do realize I have not changed the subject at all tonight. The same thing. It's not stupidity. It is not irony. It is not even a battle, if you didn't see why they made that little side step. It is not a battle, which somebody has got to point this out. It'll finally pop up. It won't go anywhere. But somebody's got to point out that, wait a minute. I'm not a scientist. I don't know much about genes, but I've been reading enough and I've seen shows like this. And you people got to face it. That is, the geneticists. You people got to face it. What you have laid out here is the absolute proof. You thought you were talking about fruit flies and potato vines. But you have given the absolute proof that humans are as captive as tubers and little flies. But for some reason, you feel like there's some sort of moral aspect to this that would be denounced, and so you just won't face up to it. That's all. You people are chicken. You people have come right up, and you faced it, and you got right there, and you blinked. You thought, no, we can't go tell people that. It's not where I tried to start tonight. They have done everything. Just take that one show, it just brings you right to date. And all of you can see shows like that, or the articles and popular periodicals all the time about this. The latest breakthroughs in genetic sciences and studies. And it says everything except, it takes you right up to where they're about to blink. Not the scientist, life. That is the limits that life has given right now to the receiving mechanism in man, the intellect, that's right up to the point of, wait a minute. They say everything, that we've got the same, they can now put it through their own form of whatever the kind of spectrograph is, that we have got the same basic. You can see it. We have genes in common with fruit flies, with potatoes. We're not that much different. Well, maybe some of you are. And they come right up to the point to say everything that, well, there's no doubt, there it is. We're proving it ourselves. We are as absolutely captive as a hippopotamus, as a wolf, as a cat. And it gets right there, and the human intellect blinks. It cannot take in that information. And it has said itself, everything but that. If you were playing the part, you could stand there to all the Genesis in the world and say, well, come on, all right, you almost said, come on, say the final thing, say that we are as much an absolute victim, we're as much controlled in our potentials, in our behavior, in our talents, in our moods, that we are as absolutely captive as that white mouse is, and you're allowed. I mean, you said it all but that. Come on, say it. And the human intellect goes, but it's not stupidity. It's not moral fear of some kind. It's this. It said everything but that, but this receiving unit cannot take in that additional piece of information. So there's no form of irony, no form of sarcasm, that now that I keep bringing up such as this, for you to sit now and look at a TV show and go, ha ha, I'm smarter than all those bastards. Because it's obvious. They've given me all the information. They proved it themselves. They just won't admit it. That we are as victimized, we are as absolutely controlled by genetics as a possum. Ha! There is no ha! There's no place. It's not sarcasm. There's no need to laugh. Because if you can see that, then of course you would see, if you can truly see it, not just parrot that kind of attitude. But if you can actually see it, then you could see your old level of intelligence and also realize that that thing would have never received what appears to be the final piece of information right here. That is to say, well, all you're saying is that we are as mechanical and we are as tied to the genetic structures of life itself as a star is, as a quasar, as a bluebird. You see yourself that your old level of intelligence could have never said that final thing. Never. It is not trickery. It is not flim-flam that life is pulling on life. It is there's more information. The human intellect is continuing to grow. If it was not continuing to grow, if it was dead end, then you would not have unanswered questions. There would be no ambiguity. If the intellect was a dead end mechanism, then there would be answers. There'd be answers that somebody, you go, well, I wonder if so-and-so is true or if this is false, and somebody go, yeah. You go, oh, okay, and that'd be it. And it'd satisfy you. But as it continues to grow and it doesn't understand this, but that's how it has these ambiguities, these unanswerable questions, because it keeps picking up new information. There is more data available at any time than this mechanism, this receiver, can pick up. Everybody, for the weekend, go away and have a nice brain smile. And don't hurt yourself.